You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network. For more quality options programs, visit www.theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app, available in iTunes and on Google Play. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.
Bitcoin, Ether, Ripple, Litecoin, and more. Cryptocurrencies and other digital assets are taking the financial world by storm. This exploding market provides everything a savvy trader needs: volatility, volume, and liquidity, provided you know how to find it. That's where we come in. Welcome to the Crypto Rundown. Each week, we'll break down the latest trading activity, trends, and developments on everything from coins to tokens, futures, and even OTC options. If it's moving the crypto markets, then you'll find it on the Crypto Rundown. The Crypto Rundown is brought to you by Athena Capital. Known as the new wave in tech and trading, Athena is a leading derivatives market maker in traditional asset classes. As one of the first trading firms to make markets on Bitcoin futures, Athena is also proud to be an innovator in the cryptocurrency space. Through a collaborative flow of knowledge between developers, quants, and traders, Athena designs and implements their own low-latency technologies, trading strategies, and mathematical models. To learn more about our rapidly growing firm, please visit AthenaCapital.com. Now it's time to dive into the exploding world of cryptocurrencies and digital assets. It's time for the Crypto Rundown.
All right, everybody, that music means it is time once again for the Crypto Rundown, the program where we break down the action from the week that was and indeed still is on the crypto side of the fence. So we're going to talk a lot of Bitcoin, obviously, but also some altcoins. We'll talk some ETH, some good old XRP, maybe some Litecoin. You never know what's going to make it into that segment, so stay tuned for that. My name is Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com, as well as, of course, from the ever-exciting Options Insider Radio Network. Coming at you on a Tuesday this week. You know, our schedule is still fluid for this show. We're still trying to find the sweet spot. I think we're going to try to dial it back. It used to be a lot later in the day on Mondays around 4 p.m. Central to accommodate some of our overseas contingent, but I think we might dial that back to make it a little bit easier for some of our mainland folks here to get at it as well. Maybe after the option block on Mondays. We do option block 12 to 1, maybe around 1:30 might be a good time. So stay tuned for that. Coming at you that time today, but on a Tuesday, 1:30 p.m. Central Tuesday. If you're joining us live after the fact, doesn't matter. You're getting it on your podcast player of choice. So enjoy it. Make sure if you're listening to this, if you like it, share it with your friends, and then make sure you put a little review for it. It's a new show after all, so put a review in your podcast provider of choice. Let them know what you like, what you're listening to, so other people can help discover it. And joining me on the old program today, our old friend back for, I believe the third time on this program. We are joined once again by Mr. Bill Uliveri. He's the principal over there at Technical Capital Management, but he's coming at us today from the mecca of Bitcoin here and blockchain in Chicago, which is, of course, Athena Trade, a.k.a. the Athena Bitcoin guys, the guys who do all the Bitcoin ATMs. Bill, welcome back to the program. What are you doing over there with the Athena Bitcoin guys?
Well, the Athena Bitcoin guys are former traders and, from the CBOE, the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. So I'm doing a little bit of work here. You know, Athena Trade is the really Chicago and the Midwest premier and first ever blockchain-centric co-working space. And so I just felt that if I want to stay in the flow of information, if I want to, there's things happening out in the suburbs. Don't get me wrong, Mark. I've got my own meetup group there in Glenview. But if you want to be in the flow of information, if you want to be involved in blockchain conversation, whether it be from the hedge fund side, individual traders who are writing and scripting algorithms as we speak right now, I can see through the glass panel that we've got a young man who's writing trading scripts. This is really the kind of place where you want to be because blockchain happens in Chicago, and we've got a beautiful place here, beautiful view of the Merchandise Mart. So, yeah, just want to come downtown, the central and hub of, let's say, the trading floor of crypto, really.
Yeah, I've been over there. To check it out. We had Eric, their CEO, on the network last year, I believe, to kind of talk about what they're doing. I know they kind of got started with the Bitcoin ATMs, and that's still kind of a core business for them. But they also have the execution desk as well, which is the Bitcoin trade and the Athena Bitcoin. And of course, there's this kind of, like you mentioned, the kind of networking, co-working space that's kind of a quasi trading floor, quasi kind of putting brains together on all things crypto and blockchain. So it's kind of become a bit of a hub over there, which is interesting. Maybe we'll have to beam in. Well, you kind of doing it for us. You're beaming in from there now, so you're kind of getting the hubbub for us here from the trading floor, if you will, of all things crypto trading. All right, since we're at the hotspot, let's get into it. Let's dive right on into our Bitcoin breakdown.
It's time to explore the latest trading activity, trends, and developments across the world's leading crypto market. It's time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
All right, let's get to it. Welcome to the Bitcoin Breakdown, the portion of the show where we do pretty much exactly what it says. We break down the week that was out there in Bitcoin, aka the leading crypto market, at least for the time being here. We'll see if that changes, but not right now. Still Bitcoin. Lead in the tape. Coming into showtime, we're seeing Bitcoin taking a bit of a breather from the recent bullish run-up. Last show, it was north of 5,200. It's 5,215. This week, we're coming at you off about a little over 100 handles from that, right around 5,108, 5,107 or so, coming into showtime. So a little bit of a breather there. We did see it, we talked a lot about the bullish resurgence on last show. Shortly after that show, we did see it dip back down sub 5,000. It was kind of a brief respite, though. It rallied back north of that 5,000 level, and it's kind of been floating around up there ever since. So all those who said, oh, it's just kind of a short-lived blip to the upside, it has survived north of that 5,000 level for some time. So, Bill, maybe let's start there. It's been a little while since you've been on the show. The last time you were on, I think people were still out there searching. The Bitcoin bulls certainly were, and the crypto bulls. They were searching for a bullish story, a bullish narrative they could sink their teeth into. Now we have it quite literally, in the sense that we've seen a massive rally pretty much across the board in all of the crypto trading world. So let's start there. What's your take on this recent kind of turnabout we've seen in Bitcoin, and what are you hearing from the other folks there in that hub of crypto trading there? Are they all buying into this? Is this kind of, are we in a new regime here? Or maybe I've heard some people just kind of describe this dismissively as a bit of a short squeeze. Where do you fall on this?
Well, actually, I've got four ideas. We're always looking for why things happen, rather than, I think, as traders and technicians and investment advisors, just to, live and be happy with and sleep soundly at night, just knowing that things are happening. But here's my take. I see four things that have really influenced the price of Bitcoin recently, and I still think that we're still far below our bearish trend line, our resistance line. But first of all, I see that the Bitcoin low that we made back in February pretty much corresponded almost simultaneously to the announcement by JP Morgan that they're coming out with their own cryptocurrency bank-backed token. And I think that this brings a tremendous amount of credibility to the blockchain space, especially in financial services and international payments. Just imagine you're JP Morgan. You have 400 out of 500 of the top Fortune companies, and you'll be able to either settle things almost instantaneously using your own internal cryptocurrency, or if you want to settle your payments and settlements and debts in the U.S. dollar, you can wait 3 or 4 days. So this is like a huge win, in my opinion, for JP Morgan. Secondly, I think we're seeing global adoption increase. We have, like, for example, here at Athena Bitcoin, they installed a ATM machine right on the border of Venezuela and Colombia. It's kind of like an open border in Cúcuta, but here's a place where people finally globally can escape like this crushing oppression of a socialist regime and actually have an exit ramp for the first time in history to get out of their own local currency into Bitcoin. In addition to that, people who are in Venezuela, Colombia, Brazil, Kenya, no matter where you're at, you can receive global remittances almost instantaneously for virtually no fee. In your own local currency is probably more stable than Bitcoin is probably more stable than your own native currency. So we're seeing, I think, people who are suffering economically from political reasons around the world actually getting into Bitcoin. Number three is a technician. you'd have to say that Bitcoin's peak to trough, like from 20,000 down to about 3,300, is the exact same amount that the Nasdaq sold off from 2000 to the fall of 2002, and maybe even in the spring of 2003 when we retested the low and didn't break through that. So if you believe in the technology, if you believe in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, in what it means for bringing global inclusion to the masses, then you have to speculate as a buyer down here at these levels and just kind of nibble a little bit to the downside, at these levels. And then lastly, Mark, I think as someone who's a little bit familiar with cryptocurrency mining, China continues to eliminate and suppress and oppress Bitcoin miners. And the miners are the ones who release tokens into the economy. So just like when you play the game of Monopoly, every time you pass go, the bank releases $200 into the game. Every time a miner solves a block, they release Bitcoin into the economy of Bitcoin. And so by having fewer and fewer miners, that means less and less supply come out on the market.
No, you're correct. It's an interesting point. We don't get to that very often because we think of it obviously primarily from our Western-centric viewpoint of, let's compare Bitcoin to the dollar and stability and fiat and all those things. But you're right. For an economy like Venezuela, Bitcoin is a paragon of stability compared to their currency. So it's a completely different perspective, and it kind of puts things, in a very interesting light, I think. When you term it that way. Yeah, you're right. I'm familiar with those Athena guys. They have been kind of doing a bit of a South American tour, if you will, of installing ATMs throughout South America. And when you think of what's going on with many of the regimes down there, it makes Bitcoin look a little bit different, I think. But you're talking about those technical levels, and it's interesting to see all the different technical analysis going on in the world of Bitcoin. Some people have told me it works better. Some people told me it's not as effective. Others have said it did work better because it wasn't as crowded of a marketplace. But now some of the things that used to work very well in crypto are kind of coming back, which we are not as effective, which we see as kind of a bit of a maturity, a bit of a progression in a lot of financial markets. Once they reach a certain level, old school correlations no longer apply. So maybe seeing some of that in Bitcoin as well. But people were focusing a lot on that very psychologically important $5,000 level, which it broke, but it managed to rebound through. And that I think is what caused a lot of people, Bill, I think, to take a second thought. Because all the people out there who initially dismissed this as a short squeeze, right? We heard all the stories about the exchange and the guy had to cover and that drove the price up. And maybe that was one of the initial drivers for this. I was talking to some people at an event last week and they're like, it's just a short squeeze. And, if it's a short squeeze, you and I have seen a few of these, Bill. Usually it's much more short-lived, pun intended, right? It kind of goes up and comes right back down. It doesn't maintain north of this 5,000 level. So are you kind of not buying the short squeeze argument out here, Bill?
No, again, Mark, I think, we're always looking for a reason why something happens. And, you and I spent decades on the trading floor. And the biggest, most successful traders, and I could name a half a dozen names that you and probably a lot of the listeners would know, but would they ever come into a pit and buy like $100 million of options at the market? Would they just come in and say, the market is, one bid at 1.25 and say, I'm a half bid for 20,000 options? No, they would never do that.
In your dreams, maybe, if you're standing there as a local. Through your offer. Sure, why not?
Right.
How are they now?
We'd be like, I'll sell you one. Now I'm like 1.5, 2.
Yeah.
So, to think that maybe some, large whale or this large person, this anonymous person who just comes in and buys 100 million of Bitcoin at the market, I think is absolutely ridiculous in my opinion. And it's just, I just don't buy it. People with that kind of money looking to establish that kind of position would go to an over-the-counter desk and let them know what was going on, and they would be very, very careful about how they place the buy signals, in my opinion.
Yeah, I kind of didn't really believe what I was hearing about that, and looking at all the subsequent data, I'm kind of with you. It may have been sparked by some of that, someone flipping, the old quote unquote fat finger, or someone getting the heck out of Dodge or getting run over or flipping to the long side. They can look at some of the data on some of these exchanges. But yeah, this is certainly that we're living in this regime for the last week or so on the upside. That's not like most short squeezes in terms of how it's playing out. So the levels a lot of people looking at, obviously now 5,000. Of course, we maintain below that. If it can break through about 49.5 or so to the downside, people are maybe looking for a little bit of concern to the downside, and to the upside, obviously back up to where we were, a little bit north of 5,200. 100. If it can maintain and kind of break through that resistance to the upside, that's where people seem to be really focusing right now. Excuse me. In terms of focusing, let's focus in on a little bit of vol. It has been interesting to watch, again, all this vol and skew data brought to you by our friends over there at skew.co. That's SK3W.co. They were on the show a few weeks ago. It's really, really fascinating data, and they put it out there for free. It's really, if you're not using it, you're cheating yourself. It's really great data out there. You can check it out and look at things like the 30-day realized vol right now out there in Bitcoin, which if you're thinking, it's kind of settled into the upper portion of this range, maybe the vols come in a little bit. No, you'd be wrong. The realized vol is still at the upper end of its recent band. It was 65 last show. It's actually higher now. It's it's actually up to 68 right now. So yeah, the realized vol still very high out there, which is showing that, there's still a lot of, I think, uncertainty afoot out there in the Bitcoin space. What really did drive that upside move? What is sustaining us up at these levels? Certainly vol not coming in. So those of you out there who maybe are thinking quieter, calmer days are ahead for Bitcoin at these levels, maybe the vol sending you a little bit of a different message. What else has been interesting, Bill, is in light of this kind of recent resurgence out here in the Bitcoin spot there, we haven't really seen a huge resurgence in options volume, at least on some of the leading platforms like the Deribit. Looking at their recent volume since our last show, it's actually been pretty light. It was shy of 5 million on the 15th, so just coming yesterday. So apparently tax day, not a day. People are busy working on their taxes here in the U.S., working on those, not slinging their Bitcoin. So a little bit shy of 5 million yesterday. The big day over the last week was actually that was one of the better days, 13.5, but it's still a pretty light day. We saw 2.7 million on Friday, the 12th, so a very light day. About 11.5 million on the 11th. The big day of the last week was the 10th, about 35.5 million changing hands. Again, this is all kind of quoted in notional. And then about 21 million on the 9th, and on the 8th last week, about 10 million. So it's been kind of a light week, that 10th notwithstanding, in terms of volume out here. And let's look at the skew as well. Let's look out to the June contracts. Let's go a couple months out here to the June contract. That's where we've been looking for a while. And it's pretty much, the skew is still pretty much lining up kind of the way we thought, which is, if you just showed me this and stripped away the legend and say, what are you looking at? I would say this is analogous to an index with a pretty strong fear of downside in the near term. That's kind of what we're seeing here. It's a sharp bid to the puts here in terms of this skew here. You get north of 100 vol very quickly when you get into the put wing here, where we're at about this 5,000 levels, of course, the at the money, kind of the inflection point for this graph. And to get to a similar level of vol around 100 for the calls, you have to go all the way out to about close to 20,000. On the upside. So a much more languid slope to the upside there, whereas a sharp bid to the puts, what looks like a couple of odd data points here. It spikes up over near 200. Maybe someone paid through the nose for some puts recently. Looks like around maybe the 4,000 level or so. So that could be impacting some of this data as well. Looks like maybe a couple of data outliers there. But still, this looks kind of like your typical index with a little bit of some downside concern. So if you're the bulls, maybe again, it's not showing you all the upside love. Bill, does this data surprise you at all, seeing that the 30-day realized vol still very high? It's higher than it was even a week ago, yet the options volume kind of light and the skew still showing bias or concern to the downside here. Did that surprise you, or is that kind of what you expected?
Well, honestly, Mark, I could sit here and you and I could talk for an hour just on what option skew should look like in Bitcoin. And I think that if we, even took some inbound calls, or we got together a room of former floor traders, you could make a case that almost any design, almost any skew could be made plausible. You could have an old-fashioned equity skew where the downside slope is steep and the upside is kind of trails off and goes flat. I could make a case where the skew is completely horizontal, like it was in the old days in the wheat options pit. And I could make a case where maybe it should look like corn options, where it looks like an upside-down hockey stick, where it's very, very low on the far left-hand side and slopes up or right like an escalator and then curves off because there's no fear to the downside. I mean, really, to me, in my mind, option skew is a lot like corn skew, or grain skew. When the prices get too low, you have farmers who are going to stop growing grain. And if you get prices of Bitcoin too low, you're going to have miners stop mining Bitcoin. And so that's only going to shore up the supply. It's going to reduce the supply and almost give you like an implicit bid. So, until we get options traded on a U.S. exchange, like say, for example, we get the Bitcoin ETF, sometime in the next year or two by the SEC, and options are listed, perhaps at the CBOE, and we get a lot of retail, people moving in. I just don't really know how accurate the picture, the image of option skew we can get today using some of these other like one-off exchanges. And again, I say one-off not because they aren't, innovative in their technology, but it's not like, trading U.S. Treasury bond skew or, S&P 500 skew at the mercantile. I mean, we got big names, big money, a lot of activity, and, a lot of people putting their money where their mouth is in the stuff that you and I are traditionally familiar with. So I'm not quite sure what to make of the skew. It could probably be moved huge by like a 10 lot. So I don't know what to say.
Yeah, I'm glad, especially because you saw some of those volume numbers not being that high. You're right. I'm glad you said that because I've had similar thoughts about Bitcoin skew in my mind, and in conversations with people I've heard, and I've made arguments for just about every possible shape you could imagine for what Bitcoin skew should be. Should it be bid to the upside, like a crazy equity going into earnings, let's say like an Apple back in the day? That you could see an argument for that, particularly given the recent rally we've seen. Should it be all fear to the downside, maybe kind of like what we're seeing a little bit now? There's an argument for that as well. Should it be a smile? Because both sides right now we're in this kind of 50-50 environment. Who knows if we're going to rally or sell off? I can see an argument for that as well. So you're right. There is an argument. I like your point about the Bitcoin miners kind of propping up the bid to those puts, because you're right. There is a bit of analogy to be made there between some of these other, core commodities like ags and others, where there's a producer and they need to hedge their risk. The Bitcoin mining, a similar setup, a very analogous setup. So if they're savvy out there, and certainly they're out there hedging that risk at whatever that kind of cutoff or break even point is. So that could also be accounting for a lot of the bids in that. And again, you're right. This is not CME, so there's not the central kind of 800-pound gorilla that kind of takes all the data in, and it's the one kind of central market repository. People are still fighting. This marketplace is still taking shape. So this is just one snapshot of one venue. It's kind of the leading venue for now, but there's others coming online. So it is interesting to see kind of where that's probably accounts for some of those weird data points we're seeing here, those weird prints that are going up on this one single venue's data. Speaking of CME, let's get out to the futures, see what's been going on out there, the kind of big lit venue for the crypto futures, especially now that SIBO kind of getting out of the game, at least for the near future. Coming into showtime, that April future, that front future is at about 51.15. It's up about 100 handles, actually, so it's doing fairly well out there. Also doing fairly decent paper today. It looks like around 5,000 contracts on the tape, so not lighting it up by any means. The record out there, I should say, came a little over a week ago on April 4th with about 22,500 contracts. So nowhere near that level, but still 5,000. You're talking about 25,000 coins changing hands. That's pretty interesting stuff, especially given the recent data. That's another good point I wanted to pick your brain on, Bill. We've been talking a lot recently on this show about that very controversial data that came out of Bitwise recently, effectively saying 95% of the spot market as we know it is nonsense. Just throw it all away. Now, those guys obviously have a bit of an axe to grind. They're trying to file for an ETF out there, so it makes them look better if the volume data is a little bit different. But still, this has been a very controversial topic. I've heard interesting pros and cons on this. What's your take on their data they submitted and the fact that they think, or they're claiming that the lion's share of the market as we're seeing out there right now is pretty much nonsense?
Boy, that's a great question, Mark. The Bitcoin trading volume is fake. I got to be honest with you. I'm not exactly sure how to answer that one. I mean, looking from from the portals that I visit and the websites that I visit, I wouldn't call the volume fake. I would say that you're still trading billions of dollars of Bitcoin on every single day. It's still what is it? I'm not sure what that means, right? The fake news in Bitcoin. I mean, you remember back in the old days, there was an exchange it was a very well-known options exchange that would count the open interest twice. Like if you bought a contract and then the seller sold you a contract, there was one contract, but this particular options exchange would count the open interest as two, right, rather than just one. So there's different ways of measuring volume, and it isn't so apparent, I think, from the front page. all you have to do is pull up like a blockchain explorer or a Bitcoin blockchain explorer and just watch it for 20 minutes, and you'll see that there's a significant amount of volume going through. So I'm just going to question the Bitwise report just out of caution and think that there's more going on than meets the eye.
But if there's let's say it's the middle ground is somewhere the answer that does put the conversation around the futures in a little bit of a different light, doesn't it? Though I mean, these futures that people had kind of dismissed as not really doing the lion's share of the volume, now they're doing a little more than you think, maybe, which I think kind of makes that conversation a little bit more interesting, makes the people out there who've been leery to dip their toes, maybe institutions and others, into the space, because the futures that are listed aren't the lion's share of the action. They actually account for maybe more than they think. So I think there's obviously a glass half full and a glass half empty way to look at it. And the glass half full one is, the futures a lot more relevant than you might think. Speaking of the futures, Kraken, I was talking to some Kraken guys last week. I'll have to get them on the show here to talk about their futures. Obviously, they've invested heavily with their crypto facilities acquisition in getting into this futures game. Kind of hard. I'm looking to get better ways to get some of their volume data out there right now. It's not as easily accessible as it is on CME. But early anecdotal things I'm hearing is that the futures are actually doing fairly well over there. Again, I want to get those guys on, maybe talk about why they're dipping their toes more aggressively into the derivatives space and the listed derivative space as we speak. Speaking of the listed derivative space in crypto, a lot going on that side of the fence. I've said many times here on this network and indeed on this program that the hot new thing, whenever I go to an event or a conference, hot new thing, the hot new business card everyone's got is we're the new crypto derivatives exchange X. We're the new crypto, we're going to be the new crypto CME or pick your poison, CME, whatever, NYSE, whatever you want to be. But they're going to be the new crypto derivatives venue X. And there's a bunch of those out there right now. And it's like the hot new thing, even within those venues, is forget the cash settled. That's for losers. We're going to go for the old physically settled, backed, obviously kind of famously is kind of getting into that space. That's, of course, the venture. That's kind of call that what you will, a subsidiary of affiliated firm of ICE over there. They're trying to get into that space. And now others are doing it, including Ledger X. Ledger X is trying to actually beat them to the punch. They're also filing to launch and list physically delivered, physically settled Bitcoin futures coming up. They've actually filed with the CFTC for a designated contract market license. So many different licenses you can get from the CFTC. It's very confusing sometimes. But in general, they already obviously have other licenses with the CFTC, and they've been talking with them apparently since November to try to get the ball rolling. Like a lot of things in the regulatory space, they still don't have a lot of clear insight into when they could hope or even if they're going to get approved, but they're trying to race backed out to fruition, to launch. They're already obviously a SEF, so they've been approved as a SEF, which is, of course, a swap execution facility, and they're also clearing. They're a derivatives clearing organization, so they can actually clear. So they got several pieces of the puzzle already. Now they just need that last one, and then they could launch this physically settled contract. We're also seeing others. We've had the Eris X guys here in the studio in the past. There's some big money chasing after the physically delivered, physically settled futures market. Most infamously, Eris X backed by TD Ameritrade. They have a big stake in that, so some big cash at work there. Of course, backed by ICE, pun intended, over there. So Ledger X getting into some deep waters there, some deep pockets they're competing with. Be interesting to see which of these three venues, all of them are pretty much now in regulatory limbo. They're all waiting. So interesting to see which one get approved first. We saw that weird dance going up with CME and SIBO about a year and change ago where they raced each other out of the gate. Maybe we'll see a similar situation come into fruition here with these physically settled futures. Bill, is this something that excites you here? Are you kind of watching this emerging ecosystem of crypto derivatives exchanges with interest? And does the notion of new physically settled futures, does that excite you guys over there?
I find everything really interesting that when you combine cryptocurrency and Bitcoin with the exchanges and trading. I mean, that's the fun, and that's what we've always kind of cut our teeth on. For me, I was not at all disappointed or disheartened when I heard that the Chicago Board Options Exchange, I think they temporarily delisted their Bitcoin futures. Is that correct, Mark? I mean, I think that's what I heard.
Yeah, they effectively did. They said they're not going to list any more past June, right? So they effectively delisted them going forward, yeah.
And I'm okay with that because you may remember, at least I do, when we were, well, at least when I was in the OEX pit, which was the S&P 100 pit, we had a perfect hedge between the OEX options and the S&P 100. And the volume never really got off the ground in the S&P 100. So what happened was the CBOE eventually delisted that, and all our hedging went over to the S&P 500. And I think the same thing is going to happen here. I still don't believe that retail clients with a 401k or a self-directed IRA are ever going to trade futures contracts in Bitcoin. That's more of an institutional product, in my opinion. You're going to see people, buying and selling, a Bitcoin ETF. They're going to be selling options electronically. And either market makers or the electronic market makers are going to hedge with the Bitcoin ETF, or maybe if they get a big position, they'll take some of their risk and they'll spit it off over to the futures exchange. I mean, I just don't see how this is. To me, history just tells me this is exactly happening like it was all over again. And we even had back in the day, we had this joint venture product. We had Dow Jones Industrial Average futures at the CBOE, and a lot of those products kind of failed. I don't want to say failed miserably, but they just never got the traction. So from my perspective, the CBOE kind of backing out of the futures, I don't really care about that. I think it's still game on. I think the futures activity is going to be happening at the mercantile because they embrace institutional trading and the big money, and all the other exchanges like Bakkt and ICE and with the inroads we're seeing with Fidelity and some of the other custodians. I still find it very, very exciting, and we're just, in my opinion, very, very early to the game. I'm not quite sure what that means for Bitcoin per se, whether it will be $500 a token or $1,000 a token, or will it be $1 million a token like some hedge fund managers believe. So price, forget about price. We're moving into a new paradigm of trading, and I think cryptocurrency is really the place to be. And again, I'm not that worried about some of the one-on and one-off things. And what's also exciting, Mark, honestly, is that being in Chicago, right, we're the trading capital of the world per se, and we saw some of that disappear from, say, 2006, 2007, when Flash Boys, algorithmic trading came on board, and basically computers replaced people. But we're now seeing small teams of really interesting people in Chicago creating cryptocurrency exchanges. And it's like this whole new, it's like trading 3.0. I mean, I find that part fascinating. And so we'll see how that plays out.
It's been interesting. You're right, because I have heard a lot of people kind of coming at it. Oh, the sky is falling. Oh, CBOE delisting. This is clearly the end for any institutional interest in all things Bitcoin. Clearly there wasn't any demand there. So CBOE getting the heck out of Dodge. That's the beginning of the end. It sounds like you're not buying into any of those arguments at all, Bill.
No, not at all. I think the CBOE is going to. This is just my personal opinion. Okay, we saw the CBOE embrace the VIX product. We were trading VIX products back in the 80s, right? And it was just like the at the money straddle kind of volatility, and then it received different iterations of taking into consideration like a dollar weighted average skew, and it got a little bit more complicated over time. I think the CBOE is going to be the perfect place to come out with a Bitcoin option. I think we will get a Bitcoin exchange traded fund. The CBOE will dominate options trading in Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. And I think the CBOE has a monetary incentive to collect some of the royalties that are potentially available, but for having a proprietary option traded on their exchange. Part of the fee schedule, if you go to the CBOE website, includes that very tiny fee that goes either to the Russell 2000 royalty fee or Dow Jones Industrial Average or S&P 500. I mean, that's part of the game, is you have to pay a licensing fee. And who gets the licensing fee for a proprietary index like the VIX? It's the CBOE, and I am totally cool with that. And someone's going to get that royalty fee, and I think it's going to be the CBOE. And I mean, you've got so much experience. They're super, smart minds, and people with a lot of experience at the listed exchanges are going to embrace this, assuming, of course, we see greater adoption by retail investors. But yeah, I'm not at all worried. They got this. I mean, they so got this. To me, it's not even
I think that path makes a lot of sense. Wait for the ETF to come on board and list options on that. Do what you do, right? Do what you do well, which is the options. Yep. Don't mess around with the futures, getting into this fight. I know there were some questions about Gemini and the settlement, and that was really some of the core issues of people and institutions not adopting that product. So why even get into that fray if you don't have to? Just get on out with listing the options and do what you do well. So I think that makes... You're right. I think that makes a lot of sense. And speaking of what we do well, let's see if we do some altcoin well. It's time to move on into the altcoin universe.
It's time to move beyond Bitcoin and find out what's moving the rest of the crypto marketplace. It's time to boldly venture into the altcoin universe.
All right, everybody. Time to talk some altcoin. Let's kick it off. Looking at the top 10 coins out there by market cap again. We talked about it before. Some of these market cap numbers can be called into question a bit, so maybe take these with a grain of salt. Coin market cap, all the others, CoinDesk, all the others who really cranked and crunched these numbers. Taking into question the total, maybe overall value, but I think the percentages and the rankings on the board would probably be similar, even if some of these numbers might be smaller as a result. But let's look at them here. Bitcoin number one, obviously flirting with 100 billion right now. Again, take all these numbers, totals with a grain of salt. About 92 billion over there right now. ETH number two, 17.6 billion. Putting a lot of distance, ETH between number three, XRP. Ripple and ETH were kind of fighting for a while there for that number two spot. Now ETH's kind of just claimed it all to itself. ETH number three with just a little bit north of 13 billion. Number four, good old EOS, or EOS, call it what you will. I've heard it pronounced many different ways. About $5.75 billion over there. And number five, good old Bitcoin Cash with also about $5.75. So EOS and Bitcoin Cash, or EOS, fighting for that number four spot really there, which is kind of interesting. Litecoin out of the top five. For a change, only down to a little bit shy of 5 billion. So Bitcoin, that'd be interesting. Litecoin, Bitcoin Cash, and EOS all fighting each other there for that kind of number four spot. So maybe interesting to watch that going forward. And speaking of going forward, what's been going on and looking back as well? What's going on over the past week? You mentioned Bitcoin giving some back over the past week. Kind of maintaining, and that's kind of what we saw in the altcoin space as well. Most of the coins giving some of that upside back this past week. Our old friend Ripple down to about 32 cents again. It had rallied, looked like it maybe was getting some momentum again. It was up to 36. It's like maybe all was right in the XRP world. Now back down to 32. So giving up a lot of that upside that it gained over the past week before. So maybe the folks out there who've been singing the death knell of Ripple of late with all these other coins coming on the market that are competitors in the payment space, maybe there's something to that, given the fact that it gave up a lot of the upside that it gained, more than percentage-wise than a lot of the others out there. ETH also taking a bit of a break this week as well. I remember it got up to 180 on our last show, so it was looking pretty good on the upside. This week back down to about 165. So again, kind of coming off those highs. None of them precipitously, though. None of them like selling off aggressively, but still giving up a good chunk of what they rallied. And Litecoin, obviously, one of the reasons that it's out of the top five now is down from 88 on our last show, down side of the 80 handle now, down to 79 again. So giving up a lot. Still, Litecoin had a lot of upside to give back. Litecoin, you've been listening to the shows recently. Q1 was the percentage winner in terms of upside. So Litecoin's been lighting up the tape to the upside pretty much every show for the better part of the past few months. So it's got a little bit of upside to give back. So not exactly alarming from that perspective, but still interesting to watch. Also interesting to watch this kind of a little bit of a slugfest shaping up between EOS and Bitcoin Cash and Litecoin in terms of who. Litecoin's been dominating that for a while. Now the other is starting to get a little bit of life, which is kind of interesting. Bill, not just with what you're doing with Senecal, but also over there at Athena, obviously altcoin is top of mind for a lot of people over there. What are people saying? What's capturing their top of mind for them in the altcoin universe this week, sir?
Well, I can't necessarily speak for the principles of Athena, of course, but I'll just tell you that, part of what we're doing here at Athena Trade is to host presentations, provide education, and again, introduce people in Chicago to cryptocurrency projects. And I have to be honest with you, we have an event maybe a couple of times a month. We have people come in and present. And when you're sitting here in the conference room, which again looks out over the Chicago River, you have an appreciation for every token that comes across our way. I mean, they're all really interesting products, and they're good people, and they're smart and sharp as a whip. And so I think, like you, Mark, we have a screen up on the main wall. It's this massive, 60-some inch TV set that has the top 10, top 100 coins available. And every single token has its own little nuance. Everyone it's like a craft beer. Like, you have to appreciate the craft beer for the work and the design and the artistry that goes into it. But, it's a different flavor that you might not necessarily like. I know people either love XRP Ripple or they absolutely hate it because it's been touched by the banking industry, so to speak. You have people who think Bitcoin Cash is a huge joke, and that Lightning Network, the Lightning Network transactions via the regular Bitcoin that we know, is the way of the future. You have people who believe in Ethereum, however, they're more old school with Ethereum Classic in terms of maintaining its purity of the project. Tokens like Stellar, Cardano, TRON, EOS, NEO, like all those are very, very interesting. But then, again, and part of the conversation is a lot of these guys, a lot of the people that I talked to, they've bought these cryptocurrencies in the last 2 years. Some of them still have positive gains because they're just holding on to it. Some still have gains. Other people are like, yeah, you know what, my account's down 80%, but I'm not selling. So the conversation goes both ways. But again, every token has a slightly different attribute and a different beauty about it. And I think that's what really makes the whole space so darn exciting.
Bill, you're cracking me up here with these analogies. I love it. You're on your A game today. This is great. The craft beer, the altcoin is the craft beer of the financial space. I love it. That's a very apt analogy. That's great because it's very fragmented. Everyone has their own, favorites, their own things that they're very devoted to, and they hate the others, right? So there's a lot of that there. Is there anyone in particular outside of these, these top 5 we're breaking down here? Any interesting ones that have kind of come across your desk lately, or maybe over there in the Athena group there that maybe don't get a lot of the interesting, don't get all the spotlight, but kind of made you go, that's kind of interesting. Anything like that resonating to you right now, Bill?
Well, honestly, again, this is not financial advice. It's not a suggestion to buy or sell. But, we had a team of people here a couple of weeks ago, and I had mentioned them before. It's HXRO. It's the Real Hero people. It's former floor traders who came up with it's a game. It's like you're basically betting on above and below a certain price. They call it pari-mutuel betting. And it's a really cool, vibrant, good-looking, visually pleasant platform where you contribute your Real Hero token to the game, and you decide to bet every 5 minutes. Is Bitcoin going to be above 5120, or is it going to be below 5120? And if it's above, you win, and you're a hero. If it's below and you lose, you're wrecked. So the game is called Moon or Wreck. And so these guys again are former floor traders. The program, again, is very similar to something we might have read in Jesse Livermore's book, Reminiscences of a Stock Operator. I love the guys as far as I know them. I think they're a solid team. They're smart. It's a fun game to play. And, this is a global, is it a gambling platform? I don't know, legally, I don't know if I should say that. But it's a global game platform that operates on a system that everybody can do, and I think that's really interesting. We've had other people come in here through Athena that have presented on supply chain tokens. Again, very, very interesting concept. Maybe their tokens haven't made it out to the exchanges yet. And again, every token is like a beer, and I just either you like the IPAs or you like the sours or you like the pale ale. And I can honestly say that every one is really interesting. And so there isn't one token in particular that we love up here at Athena. We just love what people are doing in creating the tokens.
Yeah, I'm looking at this right now. HXRO. This is kind of fascinating. We'll have to get them on the show to talk about what they're up to. I like the that makes a lot of sense. The intersections of the crypto world and the gaming world and the trading world. There's a lot of overlay in all three of those. So I think bringing those together sounds kind of fascinating. I'll have to take a look at this. Maybe we'll have to get them on the show one of these days to talk about that, because that's why I like doing the show. We always get introduced to all sorts of fascinating and interesting new tokens and other things out there that you maybe never would have considered, and certainly aren't going to be in the top 10 of market cap, yet are doing interesting and fascinating things. Speaking of interesting and fascinating, you guys certainly qualify. So let's get into a little bit of your crypto questions.
You've got questions about crypto. Who doesn't? It's time to find out the answers to your crypto questions.
All right, everybody. Welcome to your question segment, the crypto questions. I gave you a good lead and I said you're interesting and fascinating. Let's see if you can live up to my build-up for you. Well, actually, it's looking pretty good to start off with. This came in from HCT. He shared this. He said, this might be my favorite correlation of all time. And he shared a link to, I believe it's a Bloomberg reporter who tweeted about this. And she has two graphs overlaid on top of each other. And it was the comment she made was, avocado prices are clearly tracking Bitcoin. And listeners, maybe we'll include this in the show notes for you. When you see this chart, the reporter's name is Tracy Alloway. So just find her on Twitter. You can see the chart for yourself. You see this chart. The correlation between the two is terrifyingly precise. So clearly, if you were waiting and looking for the new indicator to include in your models for Bitcoin trading, clearly avocado. Bill, I don't know if I've ever seen a clearer correlation in my life, sir. Clearly, we've all been missing the avocado Bitcoin link, but I think it was something to this, Bill.
Oh my gosh! You know what? I don't even know. I'm speechless. Speechless. Again, Mark, how do you respond to that, right? As an investment advisor, as a technician, well, clearly, Walmart is requiring their growers to put food and the leafy vegetables on a blockchain. So I guess in one respect, I could make a case that says avocado should clearly track Bitcoin. But, you remember the old days, Mark. And again, I'm sorry for being like this old guy that always brings up the old days. But when we were in the trading pit, when we were trading S&P 500s, futures and options, we always kept like soybeans and wheat and corn. And if the commodities would rally, we'd say, oh, that's inflationary. That means the market should go down and S&Ps would sell off. And then someone decided that maybe being a little bit inflationary was good for the economy. Then all of a sudden we'd see corn and soybeans rally, and then the market would rally for that. So again, we're always looking for something to hang our hat on. And hey, you know what? I'll go with avocados until it stops working.
Yeah, this reminds me, we used to have a great contributor on our advisor show. He's been on our Vol Views a few times too, and he's spoken at RMC, Ash. And he's spoken at RMC many times, which is the SIBO Risk Management Conference. And the focus and the topics of his talks very often were what he called dubious correlations. And he would put up all sorts of graphs that he found that looked like they're completely correlated. And there were ridiculous things like Miss USA pageant winners versus hot steam and vapor deaths in Maine. And, ridiculous correlations. And yet the graphs would line up. I have a similar feeling when I look at this chart as well. But you're right, it is eerie and a little bit unsettling. Correlation and causation are two completely different things, so let's keep that in mind. You know what I want to see? I want to see someone graph Bitcoin versus the craft beer growth in volume. Maybe there's something to that. I think your analogy may prove to be more prescient than you think, sir. I'm going to do a barley versus Bitcoin, and I'll try to have it to you by next week. There you go. I like it. All right. Speaking of our savvy listener, this is one of my favorites. This came in a few weeks ago from Bitcoin Vix, BTC Vix on Twitter. And we should send him a prize. This guy is good. He wrote into us and said, way back in 2012 and 2013, I started listening to Longo and the rest of the crew. And I'm pretty sure I am on the record at some point asking the first Bitcoin question. Obviously, I think he's referring to his handle now. Obviously, I choose to stick with my taste in the volatility world and choose my name as Bitcoin Vix. But yeah, and he wrote, nice to see you guys, because we launched a crypto show. Obviously, since 2013, we have done that. He says, nice to see you guys are doing a crypto segment now. How the times have changed in the last 5 to 6 years since I last asked that question. I'll have to try to catch up on your podcasts. He also suggests we go talk to Deribit Exchange. They have the longest running Bitcoin options platform. Thinks they would launch a Bitcoin VIX. But he went and did his homework and he dug up his question. And it was from our Option Block show, which is a very popular show. It's been running for a long time, since I believe 2010. So he was a few years into that. And it was from episode 273. And he found his question. And it was a question from Bitcoin Bravo, I think, which is what his handle was at the time. And he was asking about hedging Bitcoin mining investments with network difficulty futures. So he was, I will have to give you credit and pride of place there, Bitcoin Vix, that you were indeed the first one. So look at that. Look how savvy our audience is,
Absolutely.
Bill. I love these guys.
Time.
Yes,
Clearly.
you know, everyone got, a lot of people knew about Bitcoin for a while, obviously before 2012, 2013, but in the mainstream popular financial vernacular, it didn't really catch steam until, really, for a lot of people, until 2017. Would you say, Bill? Is that kind of the year?
I agree. I mean, I heard about it. So I have a Facebook alumni group to the Chicago Board Options Exchange, and there were definitely some floor people. There were people that were left on the trading floor that were posting what a piece of garbage Bitcoin was in 2015. And I kind of agreed with them at the time, but it wasn't until I'd say, mid to late 16 that I became more familiar with it and understood how it worked. And then I really was like all in on the expressway in 2017. So I agree with you, Mark. Still, it was, money laundering and terrorism and a virtual currency, which has no worth, no value, no nothing, a huge scam, Ponzi scheme. Every kind of adjective you could possibly imagine attributed to Bitcoin. But again, once we started getting some mainstream adoption and greater, media coverage, people began to look differently of how the technology works and not just take those little sound bites for granted and as gospel on media.
Yeah, so I love our savvy audience. You guys get savvy points for being early on that. Hopefully, I think I mentioned this to him on Twitter too. So hopefully you bought some very early, and hopefully maybe you sold it around the end of 2017. let's just live in that universe, huh?
Well,
then
the guy's got 33,000 followers. I mean, wow, that's amazing. So he's providing a lot of good, valuable content. Otherwise, people wouldn't be following him.
Yeah, he's obviously was early on the train, and well played, well done to him. All right, let's see here. We got time for one more here. Let's go. All right, I'll let you choose, Bill. Do you want to talk about the ETF, or do you want to talk about the option skew? Kind of did the option skew maybe a little bit, right? So maybe want to do the ETF?
Sure.
Okay, let's do the ETF.
Sure.
This comes from Adobe. Maybe it's the company of Adobe writing into us. I don't know. What do you think will happen first in the U.S.? Listed options, I'm assuming he means listed Bitcoin options. Otherwise, why are you writing into this show? Or an actual ETF approved by the SEC? If you had asked me this question, let's say in the fraught, frenzy, crazy days of late 2017, early 2018, when crypto, Bitcoin was floating around 20,000 and everyone was obsessed with it, I would have said, oh, God, no brainer. It's going to be the options. It's clearly, without a doubt, we'll have them definitely by Q2, probably even by Q1 of last year, we'll have the options listed. Fast forward a year and change, and that clearly is not the case in the listed front. SIBO actually going the other way, getting the heck out of Dodge when it comes to crypto, at least for the time being. And CME, even though I've asked them many times publicly on a network and behind the scenes, hey, when are we going to get some options? They don't really seem inclined to want to list them. In fact, they seem more inclined to maybe list other things, like maybe ETH futures or things like that before they list Bitcoin options. So, I'd have to probably change what I was thinking now to look at. We actually have myriad filings for an ETF. So it looks like maybe just numbers-wise, the chances of that happening might be a little bit better than we ever seeing the crypto options, at least in the near future. Let's put it this way, Bill. By the end of the year, do you think we have a better chance? I'm going to tweak his question a bit. Think we have a better chance of seeing the options listed, or think getting an ETF approved?
Wow. Well, listen, options are a derivative, and you need to have something that options are traded on. And if we're going to attract retail investors, the ETF has to come first. And that it might be the same day or the day before options are listed. But I can tell you this, I think that the ETF is going to come first. And believe me, when the SEC approves this and it gets listed, it's going to be absolutely perfect for what the retail investor needs. It will have all the safety, all the custodian issues, whatever exercise and assignment and everything that you and I have grown accustomed to and feeling comfortable about trading options. All of that will be contained in the exchange traded fund. They will have the back office obstacles and complaints and the issues in terms of, lending and, margin, all these things will be taken care of. And you've got to solve those problems first before anything else happens. So kudos to the SEC, kudos to the exchanges, because, you don't want what could be the greatest technology since the internet to blow up because of a silly filing. It's got to be done right, Mark. I'm telling you. And when it does, it will take care of itself. So I say Bitcoin ETF first, and then options later.
Well said, sir. Well said, indeed. Unfortunately, listeners, that music means it's been an hour already. Bill, isn't it amazing how fast time flies when we're talking all things crypto, sir?
Oh my gosh, it's just so fast.
So yeah,
I love it.
Unfortunately, that's all we got time for this week, but don't worry, we'll be back next week talking all things crypto, answering your questions, breaking down the altcoin universe. You guys clearly love it, and we love bringing it to you. So look forward to that. Probably, again, a little bit more reasonable time for some of you guys here, at least stateside, where we try to get the live around maybe 1:30 going forward to make it a little bit easier for you guys. But before we go, Bill, what are you working on? What do you have cooking up? Maybe some appearances, maybe some projects, maybe some interesting things you're seeing over there in the Athena land that may interest our users, sir. Now is the time, sir. The floor is yours.
Well, I would say a couple of things. One, please, like and share us on Twitter and, either Athena Trade or Athena Bitcoin. Take a look at some of the events that we're having here. And, in many cases, and many times they're open to the public. You just have to find us perhaps on Eventbrite or Meetup. We're going to be doing, now that the weather's finally breaking and spring is here, despite the snow that we had on Sunday, we're going to be doing some, lunch and learns on cryptocurrency. I would like to do a wine, women, and crypto event, maybe after hours, to bring, people that normally don't attend cryptocurrency events to the space, because predominantly the attendees are men, right? And they're the computer geeks, and as I said on LinkedIn, that their idea of a wardrobe upgrade is like the new T-shirt they get from a conference, like swag. So it isn't exactly the most, visually appealing conference in crypto, but there's really smart people, and they're doing good things, and they're building awesome stuff. So I think just like and follow us, watch us, follow us, and come and join the conversation and be a part of the crypto blockchain space in Chicago, because this is ground zero in my opinion. It's really a great place to be. And if you need to buy Bitcoin using an ATM, look us up.
There you go. And listeners want to find out more about all that fun stuff. Where should they go? What should they do, Bill? What's the URL? What's the Twitter handle? I
would go to www.athena.trade. That would be the co-working space. And Athena Bitcoin, I think, is athenabitcoin.com. Actually, I don't remember off the top of my head, believe it or not, because I spend more time on the Athena Trade website. But Google does everything, and you could just do a Google search for Athena Bitcoin, or go to www.athena.trade.
There you go. Check it out, and check out Bill over there on the Twitter machines as well. He is just Bill Uliveri, if I can pull it up for him. Bill, I'll have you give. What's your Twitter handle if people want to follow you, sir?
It's at B Uliveri.
There you go.
And Senecal, you do a search for Senecal Capital Management. I post things all the time, on what I see regarding cryptocurrency and blockchain and the technology and interesting projects. So I'd be happy, to continue doing that. If anybody wants to reach out to me in a private message, that's even better.
There you go. Senecal. That's Cenacle. SenecalCapitalManagement.com. And on behalf of Bill and indeed myself, I want to thank all of you out there for downloading, streaming, subscribing, for sending in such great questions. Keep them coming. And we'll see you back here next week for more of the Crypto Rundown.
The preceding program was a production of the Options Insider Radio Network. For more quality options programs, visit www.theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app, available in iTunes and on Google Play. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions@theoptionsinsider.com.